The Wisest Woman in the World Chapter 1. What is the best option for a woman who is totally disappointed and fed up with her marriage? Quit or stay put? I had spent several days wondering of the option that was most appropriate. I had stayed awake for several nights trying to justify any of the options that I might take. But each option I decided to choose led me deeper into the dark chambers of pain and frustration. It was like the dilemma in Forsyth the Devil's Alternative. Whichever option I chose, people were going to suffer. Sadly, I belonged to those who would suffer. Though it was not my suffering that bothered me so much. It was the suffering of the innocent, the real victims of this ugly scenario. I was sad. My experience taught me that the saddest woman in the world is the woman who is totally fed up with her marriage but doesn't know what to do. In that moment of despair, envied Oprah Winfrey, who said, "When I look into the future, it is so bright, it burns my eyes." I had looked into my future, it was so dark, and it blinded my eyes. I wept. My tears dropped down the floor. Tears that announced to the world, like the town crier in my village, that I was having a rendezvous with failure and frustration. The tears made no noise on the marble floor. There was silence all around me except for my sighs of despair. I was sad. Which woman in my shoes wouldn't be sad anyway? My marriage, like a vehicle whose driver had lost the control of the steering, had swerved off the road of sanity and was speedily heading to the ditch of destruction. Divorce was imminent. God. How I hated to mention that word. How I had tried to avoid it. Soon, I would be packing out of my matrimonial home. Soon, would be all alone in the wide world, without a man to think to and call my own. I wondered what people would say. It was the fear of what people would say that had kept me this long. It was not a thing of pride, in my own reasoning, to be introduced anywhere as a divorcee. The world had even come up with a jeering term for people of my caliber who divorced their husbands. The world now called them senior divorcees. I didn't want anybody to call me a senior divorcee. It was an expression of mockery. I was not bold enough like Ralph Waldo Emerson, who declared, "What I must do is all that concerns me, not what people think." The tears of pain continued to drop silently on the marble floor. I wished for a moment that there was something I could do about it. I desperately wanted to save this marriage but didn't know how. Even before our wedding, many people had predicted that the marriage would soon end in divorce. A notable face in the industry had crashed, and they expected that mine would tumble down the same dungeon. But I knew that they were wrong. I was determined from the very beginning to make it work. I was willing to pay the price, whatever it may be, to prove them wrong. But I, Shana Odidi, had failed. I had taken the challenge, ran with the challenge, and fought the wicked forces that sought to destroy my marriage, but my strength was feeble. I was like the spider whose web caught a prey greater than it. I couldn't kill the Goliath that was threatening to destroy my marriage. The stones I had thrown at the evil giant had made no impact. It seemed as if the prophets of doom were about to be proved right. My husband had told me to get ready for divorce. Marriage is a wonderful thing, my grandmother had told me. A married woman is a pride to her family and a blessing to the world. I did not totally agree with her then. Now, I completely disagreed with her. The tears continued to drop. I wished that the tears would locate some cement on the floor, mix, and patch up the cracks in my marriage. Dose my headache did not stem from what George, my husband, had said. No, it was not George's standpoint that nailed into my head. It was the fact that I myself was utterly fed up with the marriage that was my greatest pain. Both of us had come to the knowledge that we were wrong to have married each other in the first place. We were hopelessly incompatible. My determination to make it work did not click. My best shot went wide of the mark. If marriage were a game of soccer, George and I were the worst players in the world. We had not been able to make one successful pass, how much more scoring one undisputed goal. Fouls, offsides, and what have you, had been the hallmark of our match. Predictably, we were about to emerge as losers. Divorce. Quit. Separate. That must be the best option, I said to myself. But what would I do after the divorce? Remain single for the rest of my life. I was only 35 years old. How would I live the rest of my life without a man? I knew some women who could and were already doing so. Many of my colleagues had divorced their husbands and were facing their lives squarely alone. Some had even remarried, divorced the second time, but like Gladys, my fellow actress, said, "We're moving on." But I knew I was different. I had always felt incomplete without a man to call a husband, even and safe. My problem, as Gladys said, was rooted in what my grandmother told me several years ago. A woman looks up to a man for protection from danger any day. A woman looks up to a man for strength in the hour of weakness, for confidence in the hour of fear, for inspiration in the moment of despair. Now I knew that grandmother was wrong. George had failed me in these respects. Yet this knowledge did not solve my problem. I still foolishly clung to the idea of a respectable married woman, which my grandmother engraved in my tender heart while growing up. I must confess that despite of the problems and pains I was going through, I still found it delightful. Especially when I was in the company of senior spinsters and divorcees to proudly declare, "My husband says," "My husband likes," "My husband is," "My husband does," "My husband is waiting," "My husband," "My husband." Yes, it made me feel good sometimes. Men may be cruel and callous, but a woman needs one. My grandmother once told a woman who was complaining about the cruelty of her husband, "A man is the seasoning in a woman's soup of existence. Without a husband, the life of a woman is tasteless." I had mentioned this comment to Gladys when she separated from her second husband and decided to move on independently. She had replied, "Your grandmother spoke in line with the wisdom of her time." Then women were like slaves and hung on to the desires of their husbands. They were like robots, having no mind of their own. They merely existed to satisfy the desires of their husbands, and men, naturally wicked, took advantage of the foolishness of women at that time to box them into a cage. Amazingly, women like your grandmother were even comfortable with that scenario. But those were the dark ages. Fortunately for us, the light of wisdom has shone on our ways. Women are now wiser. We are now boxing out of the cage. That should be the modern way of thinking for women. Thinking out of the box, as the saying goes. I am not bothered that my marriage has crashed the second time, as those idle rumor mongers called journalists described it. I cannot be any man's footmat. I am moving on. I wanted to move on too, just like Gladys, but I always wondered if I was moving on the right road. I always recalled the German proverb that asked, "What is the use of running if you are not on the right road?" Stay tuned for Chapter 2 of The Wisest Woman in the World at Aksaki. Please subscribe, like, and share.